The topic of today is Oracle Cloud quarterly updates, how to take action, how to take proper action, what you can do as a application leader, as a product owner, as a tester, as a business user that might be involved in testing, right? What you can do to take proper action around quarterly updates and how you can take that action, of course, within our tool, within the Opkey tool. Wouldn't be a Opkey webinar without that angle. So again, thank you for being here. I'm Gavin Niermeyer, account executive here at Opkey, and I've been talking about this for quite some time. So excited to share what we know here and how we might be able to help with you. We'll first start with basic context, understanding what the quarterly updates are. I'm sure that a lot of you understand what they are and have some experience with them now, but we'll set that context up front. We'll then go into testing best practices. How do you use automation for efficiency. We'll then talk about how some of our customers, how specific customers in this case are leveraging some of these techniques that you're going to learn about today to achieve better outcomes, right, for their quarterly patches, from change identification to maintenance of their scripts, all the way through, right, in Fusion itself to integration tests and everywhere in between. A lot of our customers, as you'll see, cut patch cycle times down by 70, 75, 80%. So we'll tell you about one of those customers, and then if time permits, we'll get into a demo of at least the impact analysis portion of our tool, just so you can see some of these techniques on the screen in front of you if you haven't seen them before, and of course some Q&A. So from a what and a when perspective, I think we all probably understand that Oracle, to deliver better functionality to their customers, to make sure that you as a customer of Oracle Fusion have the latest and greatest technology in your hands and in your users' hands, right, in your organization's hands. They will normalize into these schedules, right? They normalize into these release schedules where they're releasing new software, new functionality, that latest and greatest into your environment as a customer once a quarter. It depends on what cohort you're in when you're actually, taking these updates into your environment practically, but you're either in cohort 1, which is the first month of every quarter, cohort 2, which is the second month of every quarter, or cohort 3, which of course is the third month. So that's what it is. That's what we're doing. We know, like on the HCM side, there's some things that have been happening right over the past year or so. It's not a pitfall. I'm not calling it a pitfall here. I want to be on the record of saying that, but just to give you an idea, right, of like some additional functionality that might be added, right? Like fields might be added or taken away or changed in some way, but also whole UIs might be changed, right? In Oracle HCM, a whole UI might be changed from a legacy or a flexible UI to Redwood, right? So you have to understand, kind of begs the question, how do you understand what's going to happen in this quarterly update? So it usually goes something like this. This is kind of a nice slide just because it walks you through what the actual practical flow is, or what the actual practical pitfalls might be. And these are your pitfalls, right? If you're not using a tool to do some of these things today necessarily. From what I hear in many of my conversations, the process typically goes something like the following scenario that I'll paint you. We take a quarterly release, right? Like, so we know that it's coming on a Friday, and Oracle sends us release notes, and those release notes come somewhere, maybe 2 to 3 weeks before that Friday. And it's on me and my team to read through that packet of release notes, which isn't the shortest document in the world, to understand what's happening technically, to understand what's happening from a technical perspective. But then we have to somehow figure out what scripts, right? Like if my scripts or maybe my scripts are in a spreadsheet or they're in a Selenium based tool, I have to figure out what scripts are going to be broken because of these changes, right? So I have to find a way to translate that knowledge that I'm gaining from the release notes into my script. So maybe it's something like I have all my users click through all of the scripts or all of the critical scripts if I'm working in spreadsheets. If I'm using a Selenium based tool, I'm probably taking a lot of time to run through a big list of scripts and then seeing what's failed and then having my team, whoever's responsible for Selenium, go in, see what's changed, try to understand why it's changed, make some sense of it. And then eventually, right after a very long process of manual healing, of manual identification that way, I'm going to go back in and run that entire script set again, right? So that's time consuming. Yeah, outside of that, like I mean, I think that just in that story, right? Like you see where the sticking points are. It's communication, it's human identification of errors. It's needing to rely on people in the first place to do something that maybe I shouldn't even be asking them to do, right? They're probably doing this on top of whatever their normal function is. They weren't hired to be testers, at least a lot of the time. You might have a testing team, depending on who you are. That's a typical flow, and it leads to issues. It leads to impacts. You might not find all of the issues that you need to this way, right? That's risking breaks going into your production environment at the end of that 2 week window that you have to test. You might have issues where, like again, it's time intensive, it's labor intensive. You might have issues where you're asking those people to, your business users to stay overtime, right? Test until you can't test, even though you have so much else on your plate. Like that's not necessarily a great story to be telling your end users. So what can we do? How can we change that narrative, right? It doesn't feel good necessarily, like, telling that story and knowing that that exists out there. And I think that there are a lot of things that we can do with our tool from a best practices standpoint to get you out of that cycle of manual effort, of that kind of identification. And so we can start to understand what some of these best practices are and how it will work practically within the tool to execute these best practices in a much more rapid way than you would without a tool like this in place. So the first thing here from a best practice standpoint is understanding what's changing in your environment, right? Understanding how things are going to be implemented, how things are going to be changed, and you know, knowing where that's going to impact you from a script perspective. That's something that we'll cover, and I'll show you how we do this in the tool itself when we get to the demo. Some other things to think about, there are security role validation changes happening post update usually, right? This is outside of functional UI. This is something that is important to understand how to identify as well, because we all know if things change in that way, users are going to walk in, the Monday after the patch is actually accepted and maybe not have the full permission set that they did, and that causes friction and support tickets and issues like many of these things do. Stopping inbound and outbound transactions also, very important, as well as making sure that you have some sort of a checklist that you're going on. You could have a checklist many different places, right? But whether it's in a test management tool or a notepad or a spreadsheet or in Opkey's QLM tool, right? There's even an answer for that, something as simple as a checklist within Opkey. From a automation perspective, again, we kind of already went through this list, right? What's traditional versus what's automated. You see all of the things that you need to do on the top from a traditional perspective. Um, a lot of mapping happening, a lot of manual data techniques happening, a lot of documentation that has to be standardized, just a lot of manual work all in to get to the point where you have test cases that, again, they're engineered. They're not even real life test cases, but with a tool like Opkey, very easy to identify your real life test scripts, fine tune those to your environment around every release, and run your real life test cases. I'm going to skip to this. We'll see this come out in the webinar. How we use actual features within the tool to allow you to stick to these best practices, and not only stick to the best practices, but deliver the result that you're looking for here. Just so you have a sense, this is the overview of what those features will be. And it's not just a feature conversation with the Opkey tool either. It's really important to know that because we have a strategic partnership with Oracle themselves, there's some things that are happening outside of our technology that still affect the technology, that still make it beneficial, and it's something that's hands off for you as a customer. Let me explain what I mean a little bit better. So because of this partnership, one thing that we do with our existing customers is deliver pre-update advice, right? So an advisory document. This typically hits our customer inboxes about 3 weeks before the first weekend of the first cohort of any given quarterly patch. So you're in cohort 1 of 24D, starting in October, everyone already has received that patch advisory document. This boils down a lot of the disparate information, a lot of the redundant information that you're getting in patch notes, relating it directly to testing, and getting it sent out to you. So this type of advisory is something that a lot of people don't even know is possible, but is something that we do really consistently. And it's typically quite well received. Some of these are also feature slides, but sticking to the ones that are not feature boxes. Another big thing that this partnership allows us to do is on our side, on our development side, ensure that your test scripts, or the baseline test scripts of our pre-built library, the 7,000 plus scripts, many of which you as a customer might be using. One thing that we do is we're able to make a lot of the changes that are happening because of the impact of a quarterly release to those scripts before you even run an impact analysis snapshot within your version of the Opkey tool. So we're doing a lot of that change work, a lot of that development work on the back end, so that you don't have to as a customer, right? Anything that's general enough, we can handle it, and then you can still use the tool to make sure that in your specific environment, individual changes that are unique to your environment are still being picked up and healed. So again, not just I think the take-home point here is not just a piece of software or a set of tools, but what we're really aiming to do is to take a measured, comprehensive approach to making sure that you have all the information that you need before and after every quarterly patch throughout the year. Of course, this has impacts on business, right? Like this is all well and good. It's of course important to have best practices that you can follow. It's of course important to have a tool that can match up with those best practices and enable you to achieve them. But at the end of the day, it's about the results that those best practices and that tool deliver to you, right? And these are, from our customers' perspective, these are some of those. I think the biggest one probably that jumps out to everyone watching is this top right benefit. Quarterly updates certified in 3 days. This means full cycle best practices, the testing cycle, right? So from doing a sanity suite to change identification to maintenance of scripts to an additional sanity suite, a regression suite, security role validation. For our managed services customers, it is achieved in 3 days. That's the SLA that we stick to. The impact that that has on a business, on a team that's used to testing everything manually around these quarterly patches is hard to put into words. Like the pressure that's relieved there, the amount of time and resources and effort and efficiency that 3 days cost versus 14 days with a large team doing testing manually. The results are just extremely unburdensome. Like it takes a big burden off of those teams. So we're of course delighted to deliver a result like that, as well as some of the other benefits that you're seeing here. Of course, risk is being driven down with having a tool like impact analysis in place. Um, the fact that you can use this tool even outside of quarterly patches, you can use Opkey to expand your test coverage, right? It's another way that you can continue to tell the story of the fact that you're de-risking your environment further, and really have tangible results to show for that de-risk. These are a couple of the high level benefits I think that it's worth focusing on here, and from a success perspective, to put some of that success into real life, a real life scenario. This is how the wonderful company has gone from having some challenges in this area to seeing some solutions, and some of the results that we were talking about. So before we started working with the wonderful company, they still have a large testing team because it's a very complex environment, as you can imagine, very supply chain and manufacturing heavy. That company, of course, given what they do, it was then and now a highly integrated environment with 300 to 400 inbound and outbound integrations to their Fusion, just to their Fusion SCM and finance modules alone, which is, it's a highly integrated environment, even for our customers. Before Opkey, testing was being done manually, right? So they were relying on this large testing team that they had to do all the testing necessary. And you can imagine with that many integrations, with an environment with just the footprint that they have, even in Fusion alone, draining time and resources. Even from a team of 45 or 50 people that were dedicated to testing. Was touching on business users as well. And then this manual testing, of course, right? It's intensive, but it's also running into bottlenecks with those resources, right? It was taking a lot of time to identify what was changing. It was taking a lot of time to make sense of how to heal what was changing, right? It's everything that we've talked about so far that was bottlenecking the process. They had some of these challenges. Of course, they weren't necessarily even getting to test everything they should be around a quarterly patch, just because of the weight test bed and the integrations and everything they had to do. So it was sometimes critical flows only, and hopefully critical flows. Everything that you would imagine, right? Defect leakage was an issue as well. But moving to the Opkey system, I think convincing, and some mindset shift. Of course, coming from approaching testing that way, not a negative thing at all to approach testing the way that they were, but it takes some time to realize that, like, I think the perception sometimes is that with people, you have the control over it because you have a good leader above those people, or you trust those people, and of course you do, right? But allowing those people and empowering those people to use a platform like this throughout the process, like while that's a difficult conversation to have at the beginning, I think that by the end of the sales conversation, they understood all of the benefits that could be gained from this and how their people could actually start to do more from a testing perspective, right? Be able to test more, to test more nuanced pieces of the platform to identify changes better, easier, quicker, to be able to see those test scripts and put them out for a rerun and make the maintenance changes quickly. So it's about at the end of the day, I think for them it was about making sure that their people were equipped with the right tool for the job, and it became Opkey. So at the bottom you see the results. Uh, Again, they did sign into we do jointly manage quarterly patches with the wonderful company. So those patches take about 3 days front to back to complete. They're able to certify their patches much more quickly in their production environment of Oracle. With that being the case, manual efforts have been widely reduced by about 90% today. Of course, test coverage has also expanded greatly with that, with the library of our test scripts sitting beside them. They have roughly what we would call 98% test coverage today. And of course, they haven't experienced a defect in production since then, from a quarterly patch perspective. So really great to see that as well. So without further ado, I'll get into the tool here. And again, just to touch on this from a quarterly patch perspective, right? We've talked a lot about what needs to be done, right? What's broken in the manual state, and how can Opkey help you overcome the challenge of manual identification and maintenance? So I'll just take 5 or 7 minutes here really briefly to show you this piece of the tool. What's happening practically in the background is that you're using the Opkey interface to take two different snapshots of your Oracle Fusion environment leading up to this point that I'm about to show you. So you take a snapshot of, for example, your 24C version of, call it a hire to retire process or procure to pay process. And a snapshot is just an amalgamation of metadata of these business processes, right? So we're getting the full picture from a technical perspective of what things look like, what your scripts look like that you have already automated, of course, at this point in the Opkey tool in this hypothetical scenario. So you take that snapshot, and then, again, practically you go into your Oracle Fusion test environment and you accept the 24D patch into that environment, right? So you take the upgrade into your lower environment. Then you come back into the Opkey tool and you take another snapshot of that same environment, but now with the 24D patch applied. So now I have an old version snapshot, a 24C version snapshot, and a 24D version snapshot. So what I can do in the Opkey tool once I have these two snapshots is simply use impact analysis to compare them. Consider one of these pre-snapshot, one of these post-snapshot. Just select two here. So what I'm doing here is comparing these versions, right? Versions of two different points of time, and I'm comparing them together. Again, I do this for a quarterly patch, right? Our customers do this for a quarterly patch, but you can do this at any time. This is your tool to use once you have licenses to Opkey. So if you want to compare changes daily, you can take a couple of snapshots daily and do those comparisons. But again, in this case, the example is 24C versus 24D. So you see here, this is what the return would look like within the tool. It's a really powerful visualization of what all is changing, right, in my environment. You can see that this is an object level And you see immediately when I pop this open, the expected, this is my 24C snapshot, and the actual, this is my 24D snapshot. I'm seeing some things in red over here immediately. So I'm seeing that looks like a button got removed here. Looks like a field got removed as well, right? These were both present in 23C and now they're not. Already seeing the power of the visualization. And here in receipts, this is a nice example. This edit receipt object, a lot of change happened over here. So some buttons were getting deleted, some field naming conventions were changing. They're actually not their naming conventions, but the fact they went from mandatory to non-mandatory and vice versa. And then you see some things are getting added here as well, right? This discount field is getting added. So again, for all of these objects, this is my change identification, right? I don't need to go into Oracle's release notes to understand what's happening. I just take these snapshots, and on a UI level, I see what's changing here within the tool. I can also see not only what's changing, but all of the test scripts that I've automated historically that contain these objects, right? So I can assume that these test scripts, if I would put them out for a run right now, these would all be failures at some point in the process, wherever they house those objects. So what I can do before I do put these out for a de-risk run is I can come into all of my selected objects here and I can start to heal them, right? But healing is not going back into this object and opening a recorder or doing any sort of coding or any sort of manual intervention. What it is pressing a button that says heal, right? So I'm saying that I have the intent to heal this now. I select the object within Opkey, I select the reusable component, and I press the button that says heal. This is the extent of my intervention as a tester with a script that's broken. And if I come back in here just quickly to show you this edit receipt component, this is in my actual script and component library. You can see easily, right? I can come back in and verify easily. This is an auto-generated field added based on the impact analysis report and the fact that I pressed the button that said heal. So again, this is, if we think about the results, if we think about how those results are achieved, the 3-day number on functional automation being completed, functional test automation being completed around a quarterly patch, it happens largely in this portion of the tool. So I hope this was helpful. I think I see a couple of questions here, so I'll get to those really quickly. The first one is, Gavin, you mentioned something. You mentioned security role validation. How does that work? Do you have an example to show? Security role validation I've found in my time here is much more important, I think, than sometimes it's given credit for. It I didn't realize just how it makes sense practically, but I don't think I realized you have all of these roles, they're all maybe changing at least once a quarter, right? Maybe more than that. We do have a security role validation report that you can generate from the Opkey tool that shows you side by side, like here were the previous roles before the patch, here are the roles after the patch, and there's a key, right? There's a nomenclature to show you what's changed, how it's changed, if it was added or removed, kind of similar to the UI that you saw in the tool. I unfortunately don't have an example to show you of that, but if you reach out to me or to Rohit or to sales@opkey.com after this webinar, we can share you an example of the report and even set up a walkthrough to take you through how that would work. I see another question here. If this is just Fusion specific, or some of these functionalities exist for other applications, or if you can test other applications within the Opkey tool. Um, yeah, the answer to all of this is yes, absolutely. Opkey is a tool that is built and was built to handle automation of any tool that's web or desktop based. So you can build integration scripts with Oracle Fusion pretty easily. You can build scripts for a tool that's completely web-based or completely desktop-based very easily. And we also do have similar advanced capabilities from a technology perspective that we do for Fusion for other applications. So if you wanted to run impact analysis for Workday or for Coupa or for SAP or for Dynamics or some of those applications that we talked about earlier, Salesforce even, right? That's absolutely possible within the application. Again, same thing. You could reach out to us on our website or reach out to me directly, and we'd be more than happy to show you how it works from the standpoint of other applications, but also how it works from the standpoint of integrations of multiple applications. It looks like that's all the questions. So if anyone does have any questions, please let Rohit and I know. We'd be more than happy to answer those. All right, everyone. Well, I hope that this is helpful. Again, please reach out to us if you do have any questions that come up. Thank you for your time. Appreciate you being here and spending some time with us. We hope that you learned something. And yeah, stay safe out there. Talk to y'all soon.